Good morning, everybody. We'll be getting started here shortly. We're giving some folks a chance to straggle in so they can hear the whole presentation, but thank you for joining with punctuality. Giving an opportunity for the new attendees to slow down on the trickle in a little bit before we get started on mapping the Microsoft maze. Alrighty, it seems to be slowing down a little bit, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you're joining us from around the world. I myself I'm on the East Coast of the United States. I know we have some folks on the West Coast of the United States presenting for you today as well, so I think we have the United States covered. Who thinks they can be the farthest away? Do we have anybody calling in from international? Feel free to add your location to the chat if you feel so inclined. I see we have a hand raised from Stefan. We have England, Netherlands, we have the UK. Great. So we're getting some folks from across the pond. Ireland, beautiful country, Ireland. I spent quite a bit of time down in Limerick. That would win until we get someone landed. The International Space Station would be very impressive and win for sure until we get a colony on Mars. I think that would definitely take first place. All righty. I'd like to welcome everybody. Just before we get started, a few bits of housekeeping I always like to take care of. Seems like every webinar we have some folks that are unable to see the presentation. One to let you know, if you go to the view option up top and more options if you're seeing any problems with that, and then add shared display. That should make the PowerPoint presentation visible for you. So if anybody has that problem and we see that in the chat window, we all know who are here right now how to answer that question for them, and we can kind of come together as a community and make sure they're taken care of. The other thing I'd like to point out is at the top of the screen, you'll see a Q&A panel. And so what I encourage everybody to do is as we go through the webinar, make sure you go ahead and get your questions submitted. We'll get to those at the end of the presentation. Otherwise, you may forget the questions you have as it's being brought up on the webinar. Kind of make sure your questions get answered. All righty, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. I see, actually, Stefan, you still have your hand raised. Are you having an issue? Oh, no longer have the hand raised. Issue must be resolved. Perfect. Ooh, we've had Denmark and Oklahoma added to the list. Great, great. Nobody from Australia today. All righty, just to introduce the speakers, my name's Heath Madison. I am our Senior Director of Professional Services here at TrustedTech. So it's my job always to make sure you're getting what you need with a high level of satisfaction. Hand that off to Johnny.
Awesome, everyone. Welcome in to today's webinar. My name is Johnny. I direct the legacy, or also known as perpetual licensing, sales and support team. And I'm going to hand this off to our senior account manager, Ethan.
Hi, guys. Nice to see everyone here today. My name is Ethan. I'm one of the senior account managers here at TrustedTech. Again, I work with all perpetual licensing here, as well as my colleague, Jess.
Jess, would you like to
Jess.
introduce yourself?
I think you're muted, Jess.
There we go. Hi, guys. Thanks, Ethan. My name is Jessica. I am an account manager here for our legacy team, and I'm excited to discuss what we're going to present today.
Thanks, Jess. I always say it's not a Teams call until at least someone talks on mute, so I appreciate you falling on the sword this time for us, Jess. So as we move towards the agenda, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start out with understanding Windows Server licensing. Obviously, I'm so excited at TrustedTech. I get to focus on professional services. I've been in IT for over 30 years. I still don't understand licensing, and having experts like we have on this call to kind of navigate that for us, it's a godsend for me. And then beyond just understanding Windows Server licensing, we're going to start about transitioning to virtualization. What are the key considerations around that? Virtualization adds a little bit of nuance to it. We want to make sure we understand that so we're getting the right license for the way we're going to be using it. We're going to talk about some advanced licensing scenarios, because obviously there's common licensing scenarios and there's a little bit different scenarios that we want to make sure we at least touch on. Can't cover them all, but we're going to cover some of them. We're going to talk about some best practices and some resources for you to kind of help empower you to find the information you need. We're going to introduce an exclusive offer for the attendees today. You actually get to benefit from having 2 offers in one webinar, so you get double the benefit for your time today. And then we're going to go into the Q&A session with the experts from the team. Don't worry, I'll do my best not to answer too many of those because we have real experts on the call. So without further ado, you'll see we're going to pop up a polling question for you. And we just kind of want to understand what some of your key priorities are. If we can get that polling question brought up, that would be great. Feel free to answer this if you want. Once you click on the option and then click submit, should disappear for you. We just like to get some information and make sure you all are awake for us this morning. You don't want to answer, you can just click on the X and get rid of it. Perfect. Thank you so much. Lots of answers. It looks like we have lots of priorities for us, and pretty even when it comes to simplifying and standardizing your licensing model, as well as reducing overall spend. It's actually interesting how closely related those 2 options actually are, so that makes a lot of sense to me. Appreciate you can feel free to keep answering as we go, but we're going to move along in the webinar. We're going to start out with Jess talking about understanding Windows Server licensing. Jess, all yours.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Heath. All right. So to kick things off, Windows Server licensing model. So Windows Server is licensed on a per core and cal licensing model. What does this mean? This means that you license for all of the physical cores on your server, also referred to as CPUs. There is one option if you wanted to license by virtual cores, but you must have and maintain active software assurance on that licensing. If that's something you're unsure about, always just request a call or a meeting with us, and we're happy to assess your environment. In addition to the cores, we also need to take care of the CALs. So CALs are also referred to as client access licenses. We'll dive into that later, but you essentially license it on a 1-to-1 ratio. Please note that Microsoft does have a 16-core minimum licensing requirement. So if you had a server with, let's say, 8 cores, at minimum, it would need that 16-core license. But of course, if you had a higher core count, such as a 20-core host, you would need to have a 20-core license on there. So it just needs to match. One other thing to note for Windows Server licensing, if you're looking at a retail license, that does come with reinstallation rights of every 90 days. If that's something that you did not want to work with in terms of restriction, you do have the option of switching over to a volume license, in which that has active software assurance on it, and then you can move that around freely using that license mobility feature. All right, so there's 3 additions to Windows Server. The first one, the most basic, is going to be our Essentials Edition. This is very tailored for small business needs with, little to no needs in terms of virtualization. This allows for a total of 25 users in an AD or a total of up to 50 devices in your work group. And some restrictions with this license is it allows for no virtualization nor remote desktop services. Moving on to standard. So with one standard edition of your license, that allows you to activate your one physical host plus up to 2 virtual machines with just that single license. So this is designed for, deployments, again, with some limited virtualization and, anything at a smaller scale. If you were to, let's say, have an environment with 4 VMs, it still more than likely will not be more cost effective to license with just stacking 2 standard licenses on there. You begin taking into account the one host plus 2 virtual machines in that single bundle. And one thing to note about this edition is that it's compatible with any hypervisor. Lastly, moving on to data center licensing with one license that allows you to activate your one host plus an unlimited number of virtual machines on that host with that single license. This one, with the unlimited, it's ideal for, high virtualization. But one thing to keep in mind when taking a look at switching over to data center is that your hypervisor does matter. The retail version of data center is compatible with HyperV environments only, whereas any other hypervisor, such as, Proxmox, ESXi, you name it, that would require the open value license version of data center, specifically because it provides you that MAK for deployment. All right, next we are here to the CALs, also known as client access licenses. So one thing to keep in mind here, there's 2 different types of CALs. The first one is going to be your client access licenses, or also commonly referred to as local CALs. So it's a separate license. It essentially allows your user or device to legally access these services with your Windows Server environment or domain. It's a license on a per user or per device basis. In some things, important things to know when it comes to licensing your environment. So if you purchased your user CALs with a server license, there's no minimum purchase requirement. So let's say you had 1 server and 3 users, you could get 1 server license and then 3 user CALs. However, if you purchased CALs without a server license, there actually is a 5 minimum purchase requirement. In addition to that, we would need to collect 1 set of end user information to register that with Microsoft. So in addition to that, there is one other keynote. So 1 set will be good to cover your entire environment, and you just need it to match the newest year version of whatever Windows Server you're running. So, if you're running 1 host with 2016 and then 1 host with 2022 with an Active Directory of 10, you could get 1 set of 10 users running Windows Server 2022 year version, and that would cover your entire environment. One last thing to note on the local CALs is that there's no actual key to activate them. So one thing you'll typically always be reminded whenever you make a purchase of these is to hold on to your 2 licensing emails. Under any sort of audit, all you need to do is present those 2 things, and that serves as your certificate of authenticity. Now, the next type of CAL, the remote desktop service CALs, in short, RDS CALs. This, again, is a separate license, but that gives your users or devices the ability to remote into a server with full mouse and keyboard control. Like the local CALs, it's also licensed on a per user or per device basis. According to whatever you're running, so if you had an AD with users, you would need to get RDS user CALs. If you had a work group with device CALs, you would need to get RDS device CALs. In addition to that, unlike the local CALs, the RDS CALs, those are year specific, so they just need to match the year version of whatever your terminal server is running. Unlike the local CALs, regardless of whether or not you purchase the RDS CALs with or without a server license, there will always be a 5 minimum purchase requirement. And each terminal server will just need its own key with that 5 seat minimum. All right, and lastly, just a quick review. So this is a little visual for all our visual learners out here. But yeah, if just for the local CALs, so if you're ever unsure on what's going to make most cost-effective sense, this kind of paints the picture On our left, we've got the user cals in which, you license the one user and that user can, access their phone, their tablet, their computer or laptop versus if it's on per device, you could maybe have, 5 users or 5 individual people sharing that one device that's licensed. And, according to however your environment is set up, one or the other could make more sense. All right, so lastly, some other licensing considerations that you'll more than likely not come across. Licensing for failover, clustering, load balancing environments, all very common. When it comes to failovers, there's 2 different ways we can tackle this. You can license your primary and your backup outright with just retail licensing, or you could also opt for having, one license on your primary host tied to software assurance, making it a volume license, to then provide those failover rights through that license mobility to essentially flop back and forth between your primary and your backup. A second common occurrence is the clustering or the load balancing environment. In this case, what you'll want to do is essentially license for the highest number of VMs that each host should be able to support at any given point in time. And again, when it comes to licensing the most cost-effective route for these environments, again, we always suggest, hopping on a call with us, reaching out to the team. One of our members will be more than happy to assess your different options and, map out the best path for you guys forward. Lastly, we've got the Azure Hybrid benefits. Now, this is a tool that essentially allows customers with software assurance to deploy Windows Server licenses within Azure at a reduced cost. We'll talk about this more, so if you do have any questions, definitely submit them in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Well, there was even a question about how the licensing works in Azure, so great information. So we'll get to some more of those questions here at the end. So perfect. Before we get started on transitioning to virtualization, I am going to have a poll thrown up. We just want to kind of see where you're at today from a virtualization standpoint and what hypervisors you're currently using. You should see that pop up here in a minute. Perfect. Lots of VMware. How are you guys enjoying the new Broadcom price model? And lots of Hyper-V. Hyper-V is still in the lead. Yeah, not a whole lot of customers are big fans of that new price model. We are hearing that a great deal. From a ProServe standpoint, I always say we have a lot of experience in VMware. Even myself, I have my VCP. Obviously, I got it over 20 years ago, so it's a little outdated, but I've always been a VMware fan. But I say we do support VMware at TrustedTech. The majority of the support we provide does seem to be around migrating customers off it and onto an alternative stack at this point, but we do support it from a professional services standpoint. Good stuff. So when we talk about transitioning to virtualization, what are some of the key considerations you should be aware of? Thanks for all the poll responses. Really appreciate that. Lets us know kind of how to guide this conversation. But I am going to hand it off to Ethan to really dive into what this means for us.
Perfect. Thank you, Heath. Yeah, so when we want to consider, virtualization, we do have to look into our foundation, which is really evaluating the on-prem environment before you think about virtualizing, right? So one of the first things we want to look at is the discovery and assessment of the environment, right? We want to begin by taking full inventory of your physical servers, workloads, applications, and dependencies if you have any. During that step, we also would evaluate maybe the hardware age, the performance of the hardware, and perhaps even capacity limitations, since there are some requirements for Windows Server that may run on your server or not. Gaining the complete view of the environment allows us to identify and optimize opportunities and recommend the proper licensing from the start. And if you look at the little diagram here, it provides, kind of how myself and my colleagues here at TrustedTech kind of go through the questions, right? So you start at the physical host, You count how many physical cores are on that host, and then that'll allow us to look at what licensing we can recommend. If we're going to look into a virtualization standpoint, then it'll allow us to understand whether or not standard or data center licensing would be more applicable, right? Now, onto the second point here, the workload suitability. From there, we assess which workloads are best suited for virtualization. This includes, validating which operating system versions, confirming that compatibility with the hypervisors, as many people here on the Hyper-V spectrum, which is great. That makes it a lot easier on the end of things for licensing, at least from a cost perspective, and perhaps to even avoid technical issues during migration. This stage also helps us determine whether, again, a standard or data center would be more cost effective in that regard. Now, when we're right-sizing the future environment, we need to map out, what the architecture could look like. And that's not even including what it looks like right now. Maybe we want to look at how it's going to look like in the future. Is it going to grow? Is it going to maybe decrease? What's the peak looking like? And, potential scenarios where we want to make sure you're future-proofed, right? We want to align each workload to the appropriate host based on the performance, needs to ensure their long-term efficiency, scalability, and stability. This future proofing ultimately helps maximize your performance while uncovering, potential cost savings in the long run. Awesome. So next year, we're looking at the economics of virtualization, which has three things we want to consider, which is, the savings, the scale, and the long-term value. When we look at the cost reductions, simply by even consolidating servers, we can reduce your overall hardware footprint. This not only cuts upfront costs, but also lowers ongoing expenses. For example, maybe power, cooling, and even maintenance on all the hardware. This would create an immediate and long-term savings for you. Now, when we get into optimization, when these workloads are consolidated, we can leverage the core licensing much more efficiently and avoid unnecessary license spend. As virtual machine density increases, again, maybe Windows Server Data Center becomes the more cost-effective option. And then even at that point, we want to ask you, what hypervisor are you utilizing? Because there are some requirements that we need to look into, such as Hyper-V versus VMware, which is the most prevalent, they butt against each other quite often. And we want to understand, that data center even gives you the unlimited virtualization rights. Now, when we look at the CALs, right, this also is the ideal time to evaluate those, because there's that question of whether do we want to go with user or device CALs, and that would fit the environment. And when we're understanding whether you operate under a Active Directory or a workgroup environment, would give us all the answers, or would give us everything we need to know to give you the answers, along with how users access resources, and it just helps us choose the most optimal path for you to give you a clean licensing compliance footprint. Now, when we're looking into, virtualization, we also need to make sure that we are in compliance. So when we look at mapped licensing before and after, we want to document all existing licensing agreements. And, there's quite a few out there. There's the CSP, the enterprise agreement, there's the SPLA, open value, OEM, and many, many other agreements that we have. I will want to mention that since we have all those entitlements out there, TrustedTech specializes in mostly retail and open value licensing. This step helps us clearly identify what rights you currently have, including the edition rights, software assurance benefits, and even reassignment allowances. So we can kind of determine what can be used, upgraded, or perhaps even replaced. Now, when we look at migration requirements, before migrating any VMs or virtual machines, we ensure that every physical host is going to be fully licensed according to Microsoft's requirements. So, like going back to the other diagrams, we want to make sure that maybe the physical server is fully licensed and all the cores, or if we're going back to when Jess mentioned the virtualization or licensing strictly by virtual cores, that we are in compliance in that regard as well. Specifically for Windows Server standard environments, We just want to evaluate, hey, should we stack the licenses on top of each other? Are we going to be adding or moving VMs across multiple hosts? Those are all things that you need to consider. In clustered environments, we want to confirm that every host where a VM might run or even fail over properly needs to maintain that full compliance and has to be outright licensed at the end of the day. Furthermore, a little shout out, professional services can also help assist with migration services if in the case there are larger workloads to operate with. Now, there's some common compliance risks that we always get here with the team. And we also want to highlight these compliance issues because, we want to make sure everyone is going to follow the rules essentially, right? Such as, licensing the active host instead of the entire cluster, moving workloads without updating licensing agreements, or when we review the CAL requirements, these are often missed during that process because, there may be confusion behind the compliance CALs or the client access licenses. And we want to make sure that we verify that any legacy editions, support modern virtualization scenarios in the long run as well.
And to discuss some advanced licensing scenarios, here's Johnny.
Thanks. Yeah, here's Johnny, guys. Yeah, with all that being said, I know Heath mentioned it early on in this webinar. He's been in the business for about 3 decades now, right? And licensing is still hard to understand. I want to let everyone know in this webinar, leverage us, leverage TrustedTech, Heath and Jess and their team to walk you through the licensing models. This is just a few but of many, right? I'm looking at the Q&As and I'm looking at the chats. A lot of good questions so far. You are all subject matter experts in what you do, whether it's architecture, whether you're in finance just trying to look for the most cost-effective route. Know that TrustedTech, the legacy department, especially these licensed engineers like Jess and Ethan, we will always look for not only the most cost-effective route, but what's in compliance, because that's very, very important, right? So with that being said, I want to talk a little bit about very simple. I did see it a lot, and you guys are in Azure, right? So this is going to answer some of your questions. A lot of people in the chat and Q&A are saying that they're fully in Azure. Well, there's really 2 routes of these licenses, right? And Jess mentioned it earlier. There's your retail license and your volume type license. Of course, we're focusing on open value license. The reason why, that's because we have the most incentives that we can pass on to you, the end user, right? So with on-prem, hybrid, and cloud environments, there's really a few type of license you can use. Some you have to take in consideration. Maybe you're going to run this on Azure, like a lot of you in the chats and in the Q&A. Well, when you're on the cloud or even a hybrid environment, that really narrows it down, which makes it easier for you. It narrows it down for you to use one type of license, and that's the volume type license. The volume type license is specifically the OVL model, is going to allow for the Azure hybrid benefit to be activated on your Azure environment, saving you some money there. But more importantly, you're looking at license mobility. That is the one feature that you're going to be needing in this type of hybrid or cloud environment. And it's really simple. Some or most of you all know license mobility is just what the name says, is keep your license mobile, right? And we know that in the cloud, especially if you're in a virtualized environment, that data and that license needs to move from one instance to another, from one VM to another. So keep that in mind. Right. So we want to also keep consistency across the environment. So yes, Windows Server Data Center is often the most efficient for hybrid deployments. Of course, you want to look at how heavily you're virtualized. If you're running 2 virtual machines, maybe even 8 virtual machines on-prem, maybe data center is not the way to go. But if you're fully on the cloud or you're heavily virtualized on-premise, maybe data center is the route to go. And I know both Ethan and Jess mentioned earlier, there's a little bit more questions that our team will ask to decide which route you should go with, right? So the next slide will have a little bit of a breakdown of what I will be talking about next is versus the bring your own license model, BYOL, versus the pay as you go, right? So this is now hitting on having something on Azure, right? The environment is now on Azure. There's really 2 ways to go. You either pay by consumption, right? Or you're actually licensing this with bringing your own license, right? And you're having software assurance because of license mobility. So bring your own license. Yes, you can now activate Azure Hybrid benefits. It is going to save you some money in the long run in some cases, right? But pay-as-you-go is an option. I would only recommend pay-as-you-go if you know your environment's short-term, right? Maybe it's a project you're going to be working on for 12 months. You're really not going to be needing this environment for 3, 10, 20 years, or as long as Heath's been doing it, right? For 3 decades now. If that's not the case, if that's not your goal, if it's just a temporary project, maybe pay-as-you-go model will be the way to go. And we will always help with the analysis of that, right? We'll provide you, hey, this is what it'll cost you to bring your own license into your Azure environment. And our Azure team, or even our professional services team, will give you an analysis like, this is what it'll cost you on a monthly basis if you want to do any kind of migration. And we'll be there, right? Whether you want us to help out as much as you want us to help out, or as little, is up to you all. But if you want us to provide that analysis so you can make a better decision on what's long-term more effective, whether it comes to how much you're paying or future-proofing your environment, we'll be there to help out. So again, bring your own licenses. More than likely, we would be recommending that if it's a long-term type of environment you're running, pay-as-you-go, short-term type of environment. Keep in mind that if you go with bring your own license, that the software assurance portion of it, you will have to renew every time that agreement's over. Open value license, like all volume license agreements, are typically for 3 years. Now, after the 3-year mark with open value license, you own the license outright. Okay, so that is yours to keep. If you want to transition that to on-premise, no need to buy anything else. You have that license already. However, if you maintain that on Azure, you must renew software assurance. Now, software assurance renewal is about 40%, and I say ish, right? Because there's no way to tell what the pricing for a cup of coffee will be 3 years from now. No way we're going to know what Microsoft's going to do their pricing 3 years from now, right? So about 40% of your original cost is what the software assurance portion will cost. So keep that in mind. Again, our team will walk you through it. They can provide that on a formal quote if we need to. And 3 years from now, again, it's an approximation of 40% cost to maintain that SA active on your Azure environment. I know there was a couple questions on SPLA, SPLA. So I just want to hit on that real quick. With SPLA, guys, most of you guys are probably asking because now you can no longer use that on your public cloud, right? Like in Azure, Google, AWS. Just keep that in mind. Our team will be able to help out, and we're going to look at these two models, right? Because if you have Google Cloud, they're more than likely making you go some kind of pay-as-you-go model or bring your own license. So it kind of ties it on together. If like Ethan and Jess said earlier, further questions, right? More in detail questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll walk you through it. But yes, SPLA has ended on public clouds. It was never meant for that, according to Microsoft. But moving forward, you'll have those two models, which our team are great to work and help you with. But yeah, it looks like Heath, you're up. Heath, I think you found the sword as well.
Man, so it happens. I have two dogs that like to make themselves known during these calls, so I end up trying to live on mute as much as possible. So one thing you'll notice as you have heard us all talking, and as we continue to speak, our goal is not to sell you licenses. Our goal is to help you find the right licenses for you that are the most cost effective. And yeah, we do provide those, but we're not trying to just sell you licenses. We want to get you the right licenses. And as such, we obviously have some best practice and resources. I'm going to lead the witness a little bit because the polling question that's about to come up is going to talk about one of those best practices. And that polling question is, how often are you proactively reviewing your licensing and usage data to make sure it's, because that's where we find a lot of concern and issues come with our customers. They do something and then, okay, it's done, it's working. That's not a squeaky wheel anymore. And they've moved on. And they move on to the next thing, that the next fire our customers are fighting and all that. And they have all these hidden costs that they aren't even thinking about anymore. So I encourage everybody when they see that poll question to give it a gander. And while you're answering those questions, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Ethan to talk about some other best practices.
Perfect. Thank you, Heath. Yeah. So as we look into the best practices, there's a lot of compliance principles that every organization should follow to ensure, you're getting the right licensing and you're not going to get into any sort of trouble, right? So the licenses, what you use, you want to make sure that every physical host is fully licensed, including all the physical cores and ensuring that you have all the user or device CALs properly, acquired. Also, you want to count the virtualization rights correctly. Standard allows 2 VMs to activate, while data center allows unlimited VMs to activate. And then you want to maybe see if you're going to be tracking those VMs across clusters or perhaps even a hybrid environment. Now, when we manage the reassignments, we want to make sure, as we go back to Jess's slide, follow the 90-day reassignment rule for licenses without SA. If you have software assurance, you can use the benefits like license mobility and the Azure hybrid benefit for smoother migrations, and maybe perhaps find that it might be lower cost for you. Some common risks that you can probably avoid here is avoid under licensing during when your VM moves, or if you have any failover systems. I would double check the users and device CALs and ensure RDS CALs aren't missed either, because that is a different type of CAL that allows the remote in capabilities. You also want to take an account of including hybrid workloads when you're calculating your total licensing needs. Now, one of the main things here in terms of compliance is documentation. Maintain the clear records of your entitlements. Are you currently in an enterprise agreement? Are you in a CSP, SPLA, or open value, right? We want to make sure we've taken account of those. Keeping track records of your purchases and maybe noting what deployments you currently have. That'll help our team determine, what may be the best path moving forward later. We can review those too through the product terms regularly, and keep cluster and workload diagrams updated to even reflect the environment that you're planning to deploy. All right, so trusted resources. This is a big pot, right? There's a lot of information that you can gather for any types of Windows Server licensing. I will mention that if you're the type to go on Reddit or maybe find untrusted sources, make sure you maybe practice your due diligence before proceeding with any information or making any purchases, because there is a lot of misinformation out there that can misconstrue or lead you astray from the actual licensing model. For licensing accuracy and planning, at least Microsoft provides several key resources. The Microsoft product terms serves as the definitive source for any Windows Server licensing rule. So if you have a question or if you're unsure what rules may look like, I would definitely check out that page. While licensing guides and data sheets outline addition differences, CAL requirements, and virtualization rights, this is ultimately where you want to go if you want to find any information regarding the licensing model. Microsoft Learn, it offers tutorials and architectural guidance, especially for hybrid cloud deployments. Azure specific tools such as the pricing calculator, the Azure hybrid benefit documentation, and Azure Migrate. They help with seeing how each cost of the models would look. Maybe if you want to consider a bring your own license scenario, it would allow you to figure out what environment you're going to try and stand up, and probably even discover that, hey, this one might be better than the other, right? For support, the Microsoft Partner Center provides CSP specific updates, Premier or unified support, and the assist in enterprise environments as well. Additionally, TrustedTech's licensing specialists can help with modernization planning, validating the core counts, and helping building your hybrid licensing strategies, and even comparing maybe CSP versus EA costs, right?
So as promised, thanks, Ethan. As promised, there are 2 offers that you actually are eligible for attending today's webinar. The first is our virtualization cost optimization assessment. As an attendee of today's webinar, you are actually eligible to receive that, but at a discounted rate all the way up to $0. And what I mean by at a discounted rate, this is the first step of qualification is you attended this webinar. Just so you know, that's a $2,500 value, but I want to be very clear. And so when it comes to the at no cost piece of that, we will we are actually discount it based on what you do next. If you say, ask us to come to a virtualization cost optimization assessment, and you decide to move to Hyper-V, or you decide to change your licenses to maybe Datacenter to optimize those costs. Well, there'll be an engagement around that, and we will discount your virtualization cost optimization assessment based on the engagement you choose or the licenses you procure. But I would expect, based on how that works, the majority of customers may actually get that at $0 cost to them. So, and obviously we plan on saving you a heck of a lot more than $2,500 no matter what you decide. So that's the first offer. The second offer, Johnny, you want to go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Heath. So the second offer, which is near and dear to my heart, because it is, even although he did mention we're not here to sell you just any license, the right license. We just ended a promotion that was based on tiers, which you can save up to 18% on your actual licenses. However, because you're registering, you attended this webinar, we are extending that to you all. So again, it is up to 18%. A discount on all your licensing of Microsoft related, Windows Server, even SQL servers, not just Windows Server. Just keep that in mind as well. So reach out to us. We'll make sure you take advantage of that a little bit extra longer this week, and just talk to us, and we'll make sure you get that.
So we have licensing savings for what you need, and an offer to hopefully make sure you need less. So we have two offers there for you. So as we move into the Q&A, we'll get started on that panel. We did want to bring up a slide that kind of shows you how you can schedule these things today. By the way, no matter which button that you click on here, there's $0 charged for clicking on the button and having a conversation. So let's be very clear on that. So you'll be able to click on where it says talk to an expert or click to subscribe. Both of those will take you to the correct location to engage there. I always encourage folks to at least look at subscribing to our newsletter, because you get lots of information on upcoming webinars and just any other information that we're hearing from our customers we want to make sure you're aware of. So as we move into our Q&A, I think we already did talk some about SPLA licensing. We do have this. Can you do more VMs of non-server OS on standard like Windows 11?
Yeah, I could speak on that, Heath. So the answer is yes. You can run a virtual machine, and as long as the operating system is an operating system, right, whether it's Windows Server or Windows 11, you can certainly do so. Again, it might require a type of license, depending on where this sits on top or inside of. But again, we'll be here to help out with that and guide you to the proper Windows 11 license.
Perfect. Thanks, Johnny. Have another one asking about downgrade rights. If you have 2025 license, can you downgrade to 2022 if you need 2022 for maybe a legacy app that doesn't support 2025?
Definitely. Yeah, I can answer that one as well. So all volume license, as mentioned here many times, open value license does allow for downgrade rights automatically, whether it's a standard license or a data center license. And I mentioned that because with data center, whether it is a retail or a volume license, as long as the host is a greater year, your virtual machines will be allowed to be a lesser year. Of course, it has to be within Microsoft's life cycle, right? So if you buy a 2025 Windows Server data center, you spin it on your host, you activate that on the host, your virtual machines then can be running on all the way down to 2019, even some in 2016. So you can.
Wonderful. Moving right along. If we're migrating completely to Azure, and I know you touched on this a little bit, but I just want to make sure that we're addressing the question. From on-premises, what are the CALs and server requirements for workloads running in Azure? AD, file servers, SQL, etc.
Yeah, good question. So because you mentioned they mentioned multiple server licenses. First of all, note that all CALs are different, right? There's Windows Server CALs or SQL CALs. Every server has its own CALs. Not to be confused. Well, I got Windows Server CALs. That means I have CALs for every other server license I have, right? The answer is no. So make sure that's one thing I want to point out. The second thing is that on hybrid environments, because likely you have an on-premise, maybe it's backed up on your Azure. You're going to need both the local licenses because you're on premise, and then you're going to need the RDS CALs because you're on the cloud environment, right? Whether it's on Azure or any other on the cloud, public cloud. So with that being said, the requirement when you're on Azure, just say you were on Azure strictly, local CALs you no longer have to purchase. But RDS CALs you must if you're running an AD or workgroup setup, which more than likely you are, unless it's a file server, right? So again, if it's hybrid or fully on-prem, local CALs are going to be mandatory. If you're strictly on the cloud, the RDS local CALs no longer. RDS is a must.
Thanks, Johnny. How does Azure AD and M365 licenses affect CAL requirements?
Good question. Yeah, I'll answer this one as well. So there is certain 365 licenses that have CAL rights to server licenses, whether it's Windows Server, CIS server, SharePoint servers, all kind of server licenses, right? So typically right now, what Microsoft latest release, and I say latest release because Heath probably knows Microsoft changes their licensing model and criteria. I want to say like every time the weather changes. Right now, the current essentially guideline is if your M365 users have an M365 E3, M365 E5, and again, M365, not O365, or M365 E3, E5 or higher license. John Smith is assigned this license, and John Smith is an AD, a named user in the Active Directory for your Windows Server. Then that M365 license equals a user CAL, if that makes sense, right? So no longer do you have to have M365 E3 users and you have to have a CAL for them. It's just one.
Wonderful. Thanks, Johnny. And with E5 costs going up, speaking of changing licensing requirements and the way it's priced, Johnny, that was a great segue into this next question. With E5 costs going up and Microsoft cost increasing as the company breaks down individual value components, what kind of help can a trusted tech team offer to pick and choose the optimal individual licenses versus the E5 bundle?
Yeah, and definitely, we actually have an entire department dedicated to this, right? With this our 365, and even sometimes our Azure team gets involved a bit. So essentially, yes, sometimes these E5 licenses are very costly, and maybe you just need one or two, or maybe even three features that come with that license. Well, our team is really, really great in essentially discovering what do you actually need, and can we just pick this a la carte, right? Maybe a business premium license will be okay, and maybe just adding an add-on in there, and that will save you tons of money per user, right? So we are able to discover what exactly is needed, and is there a la carte type of licenses that we should be bundling together for a user rather than one whole package.
Right. Although we focused a great deal on the legacy, the perpetual licensing on this call, our CSP team that focuses so heavily on our cloud licensing, they are experts in that. And once again, I feel very fortunate in every call I'm on with them because I don't even have to try to navigate it. They live and breathe it and can run circles around me in that. Can you license VMs with perpetual licensing?
Yes, absolutely. I'll answer that one as well. So perpetual licensing, right? It just means, hey, you have no cost. You can license VMs with perpetual license and no SA, no recurring agreement type of renewal, as long as it's on premise. If it's fully on premise, it's a perpetual license, it's a one-time buy, and you can use it for the life cycle and even after, right? If you want to have your environment vulnerable, right? Which brings up another thing, Heath. I've come across, especially in the end of the years, we always come across of people having older operating systems. Know that they still work everyone, they if you go into your environment, you're running a 2003 Windows Server, hopefully not, but if you are, I'm sure it still functions, right? If you're running some archaic type of application, no big deal. But just keep in mind your environment is vulnerable, right? It's no longer receiving any security patches, any updates, and all that. So keep that in mind when looking into this. But yeah, to answer your question,
Don't assume, Johnny. I fixed a customer's 2003 SharePoint server like
oh
3
my
weeks
gosh.
ago.
Oh wow.
Luckily, I've used SharePoint Server 2003, so we were able to get them back up and running.
That's funny.
And I think that's
Jason,
kind of
that's funny.
yeah.
Jason.
It's I've done a lot of work in manufacturing as well, and it's amazing what you find that out on the plant floor that is running that one application that was built by Joe 25 years ago, sitting out on the plant floor, and everybody's afraid to do anything to that machine. So I think you already touched on this, 365 licenses that include user CALs.
Yep.
And you already talked about that. So we'll move on. Here's one specific to your offer. Are there any requirements to leverage the 18% off discount? Would that apply to 365 licenses and or on-prem software licensing?
Good question. Whoever asked that. Yes, it's specifically this promotion is going to be for any server type license and other products, right? So essentially perpetual licensing was going, whether it's a retail or a volume type license, that's what it applies for. Now to leverage the 18% off, there is a tier. So I want to be very transparent, right? So immediately right now in December, whether you buy $500 license or up to $5,000 license or $9,999, you get 12% off immediately. Anything over $10,000, that's the total order value, is 15% off, and orders over $50,000 is 18% off. Now, keep in mind, our team will always try to dig for additional incentives. If we have to even deal register something, right? We will, if we can, we will for you, right? And we will pass those savings on to you. Please trust us, is in the name, TrustedTech, that we will do that. So we will always pass that on, and we will always try to get you up to 18%. And if in some cases, if it's higher, we will.
Our goal is to be your trusted partner and advisor in this. Now, when it comes to the discounts for any of the 365 licenses, I'd encourage you to either meet with your existing AM, let them know, or your account executive, or for new customers, reach out to us and we'll get someone on the phone that knows how to navigate whatever discounts we can provide. There's always different promotions. As a direct managed partner with Microsoft, we get access to some promotions that we will always pass on to our customers. Another offering related question. What does the virtualization cost optimization assessment entail? So what this entails is it's meant to be a shorter term engagement. And what we want to do is get you potential value as quickly as possible. So you're going to meet with our senior architect team who are experts in the space, who are going to work with you. They're going to assess your environment. We have a tool we use that kind of looks at the before and after kind of snapshot, where the potential cost savings exist and what it would look like and how you could take advantage of those cost savings. And it's not all licensing. It's, optimizing the way you're doing things. You know what? If you can have a dozen servers running standard, well, you know what? Maybe one server, two servers running Datacenter would be a more cost-effective solution for you. So we'll start looking at options like that. We'll also look at different options to go to, whether it's optimizing the servers you currently have, or it may be that what would it look like if you went from VMware to Azure Local or VMware to Hyper-V, or how are you licensed on VMware? One of the things I see with customers a great deal when we look at how their virtualization is being done is we'll see that they may not be in a compliant state from their licensing on those VMware servers. And so we look at ways to kind of like talk to them about how licensing works when it's licensed on a third party like VMware or Proxmox or any of the other options, but VMware is one of the more common ones in our poll. And then we'll talk about making sure what it would look like to become compliant. Or are you over licensed? because VMware is not quite as simple as saying, oh, you have data center on the host and you have unlimited VMs on it. So customers make guesses and then they move things around, and it may change them to where they're over or under licensed. So we try to help with that. So hopefully that answered that question a little bit. What are the future licensing options for Copilot Enterprise? Here's one where, I mean, if you know it, Johnny, that's fine, but I would encourage everybody to work with our account management team who are experts in that CSP licensing. Any other questions in our last 4 minutes? You guys asked some great questions today.
I agree.
All righty. Well, I appreciate everybody for joining us for 57 minutes today. Hopefully you found some value in this. Stay tuned. Subscribe to that newsletter. Find out what webinar we have next planned for January and beyond. Oh, we had another question come up. I knew if I stalled that long enough, we'd get another question. We always get at least one more. So if I'm wanting to move a few small servers to the cloud as well as from hybrid AD to Azure, is it worth signing up for the cost optimization assessment or just have a conversation with my account manager? You can sign up for the cost optimization assessment, which, by the way, someone will meet with you and discuss that with you. That first conversation is no cost whatsoever. There's not even like a, oh, if you spend this, then it's free. No. That is just a conversation. It's not going to hurt. So I would encourage you to have that conversation. But you can also reach out to your account manager, let them know what you are thinking of. Let them know you submitted the request, and they'll see that anyway. But that way it just kind of keeps everything tracked, and we'll make sure you get the right conversation for what you're trying to do. All right. Well, once again, thank you, everybody. The recording will be made available to everybody. And if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are here to help. We want to partner with you on your technology success.